Glad to have you all here. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Susan Stewart. I am a educator with 25 years experience, and I have spent most of my time in the grades K-2. I also spent 10 years as an instructional technology TOSA, and now I'm a grade 1 teacher. So when I talk to you about Seesaw, no, I'm talking about a tool I use every single day in the classroom here. So welcome to Tracking Progress Against Standards. Really, this training is designed for people who have some Seesaw experience and to support you in learning how to use Seesaw to track and monitor student progress against standards in Seesaw. Let's get rolling. Does anyone relate to this photo? I'd like you to meet Miss Watson. She is a dedicated third grade teacher who just remembered report cards are due next week. She has spent the past few months focusing on differentiating learning for her students in order to support them in mastering the standards the school follows. She knows it's important to track all of this learning and growth, and she's done it, by the stacks of paper you can see right there on her desk. Lots of data collected. However, she needs to organize this all of this great learning and finish some grading in order to successfully complete her task of trying to have those report cards ready and show progress that students have made with the standards. So she also has to have something ready to display and share to family members when they come in next week for conferences. Clearly, she's overwhelmed. If Miss Watson was using Seesaw to track standards, her students' progress against standards, right, she wouldn't be feeling quite so overwhelmed with the report cards that are due next week. This is because she would have been tagging standards as she assigned the work along the way and grading the standards when she was approving the student work. The standards view in the progress dashboard really gives you an overview like this. And so you can quickly scan and really input some information based on, progress to standards. Cool. Let's take a look. Our goal today, we have an objective. Today, we're going to learn how to track and monitor student progress against standards, really for the purpose in order to save time while assessing learning and also just supporting some differentiated learning experiences. Two parts or two steps for getting there. First, we're going to explore the progress dashboard. What is that? How does that work, right? That's where grades live in Seesaw, that thing that we just got a glimpse of a moment ago. And then we'll dive in how to use the data you see in the progress dashboard to support differentiation when you're sharing learning experiences and learning activities in Seesaw. Ready to go? Let's do it. So we'll start with the progress dashboard. Remember, that's where teachers are able to track student progress against standards. So teachers document standards like standards align learning in the Seesaw journal to show growth over time. Before you can use that dashboard to track them, you have to be documenting learning by tagging activities to standards. If you've never tagged work to Seesaw, we'll take a look how that looks like. I have a quick little activity or a help center article I put here. So if you're someone who likes to, click and look at little extras, there's a little extra you can grab there. But I will demonstrate how to do this as well. But when you're assigning activities, just a real basic, there is a place where you can go in and tag standards. So if you're tagging a standards, that's step one. So anything that you do in Seesaw that aligns with one of your standards, then that might be a good place to start. And then after assigning and grading those lessons in Seesaw, teachers can monitor student progress by looking at this progress dashboard, right? The standards dashboard within your teacher account. It shows what it could look like if you have all of your assignments tagged to standards. It could look like this. Imagine if you had this as your end product, right? I'm looking at this and I get this quick overview of where students are. It's directly tied to their learning and supports standards-based grading. Just a note, family members, just if you're concerned, do not see this view. Family members don't see this view, or they don't see the grades that are attached to their students' work in Seesaw. We're going to jump in and explore this now. So let's go ahead and get there. You ready? I'm going to show you why you want to make sure to grade student work and where you can quickly view and monitor this progress over time. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my Seesaw account. And when I loaded my Seesaw account today, something interesting happened, and you might all notice it right now. There's an interface change coming. And so if your Seesaw doesn't look like this today, know that before too long, we are going to have this interface change. So here we go. Let's take a look. So this it probably looks a little different than the Seesaw you're used to seeing, but just know this is your Seesaw. And it just started showing up this week. So if you don't have this view yet, know that it will be coming. So I'm going to go over here and I'm, in my journal. And I just want to take a look at my different tabs. But notice that I do have a tab up here that says progress. Yours might be in a slightly different place, but know that you do have a progress tab. And when I go to my progress tab, I can go here and look at the date of some of my work. So I come here to my assignments and I can see an assignment that was done. Now know that a lot of these, if there's not work that's been assigned, it's going to be blank. But let me go to a week that I know might have a little bit more work graded. I'll go back to, I think I got to go all the way back to August here. Let me just jump back to August for you. I think it's August 11th, week that has some good stuff in it. Nope, that's not it either. That's okay. So just know that whatever activities you have would show there. But notice how right now I'm in activities view. But the big key to this is where the big change will happen is that but I switch over here to the standards view. So if you're in yours, remember I went progress, standards view. The standards view is where I would see that. So I would go over there and I'd be able to see activities that I've done that have standards tagged, and I would see it here in the progress view. So just so you know, I can see how many activities each student has completed. I can go through and see different information, but you have to have the data in order to show that. Remember, what does it look like? It looks like this. So you can go through and you can see the standards across the top. I can see the students up and down. If I want to go in and look at some of those, these are all clickable, which means I can go right in and see those. So if I want to look at a particular standard and I want to see how my whole class was successful on that, I look up and down. And then if I want to look at a particular student and their overall progress, I would look left to right. That allows for some really actionable data, right? I can look here and say, this standard here, recognize and draw shapes. I see a big chunk of reds. That tells me that's something that I can act on, right? I can reteach that right away. And then if I look from student to student and I look this particular student here, I notice this is a student that might need extra support, not just in one area, but potentially in multiple areas. So all of this information really helps me dive in and see that there. So remember, when we're going through here, and let me go back to the other direction because I just want to show you what we got going on. What it looks like in the standards dashboard. I can see how many students have completed the activity. I can do all of that there in my own data. Now, if you have not tagged activities yet, know that that's the step one, right? So if I have a particular activity, like here I have this addition review activity. When I assigned it, I could have tagged a standard. So how does that look? I notice here on this activity, there aren't any standards marked, so I'll click on that. And I go here and decide, oh, look, no standards are tagged on this activity. So I can go into my standards and I can choose my state. And then once I've chosen my state, I can go through and search by the standard. So depending on where you are and what your activity is, right, I can go in here, I can choose just my math standards. I can go into just my grade 1 standards, and then I can go through and choose which standard it is. And then once I've tagged the standards, that is something I can now grade here. So once I've tagged a standard, and normally I would do that when I'm creating the activity or when I'm assigning the activity, I can do it retroactively too. So if you've got activities that were like a really great measure of a particular standard, you can retroactively go back and tag the standards. But the most efficient way to do it is when you're getting ready to assign something, go ahead and tag the standards. And then when I want to mark it to standards, I could say, how successful was the student in this based on whatever rubric criteria you might use. And I can go through and mark them on that scale. And this scale can be adjusted. I believe it goes from maybe 3 to 6, or might be 3 to 5. I know that they made some adjustments there, but you can mark whatever rubric system you use. And then that way, that activity has been tagged to a standard, right? Remember, I know if they've completed an activity, I know if they've graded and completed all the work. If it's a formative assessment, it'll show me that too. So I'm going to give you a few minutes right now and just kind of go and explore your own progress tab. Click on standards view. If you want to adjust some of the date and toggle between the weeks, remember how you might want to toggle between your weeks to see what that looks like, and try out some of the different filters. Go through and try out some of those different filters there to see what it looks like. I'm gonna give you a few minutes to go and look and see if you have any good data. Go in. I'm gonna try to show you a class that has a little bit more data. This hopefully will be helpful for you. I notice here this particular activity, this one is a little bit more realistic one that hasn't, this account hasn't switched over yet, but also notice how I've got a wide variety of activities here. So in this example, you see lots and lots of information. And I notice that in my own, this is your explore time, but if you want to take a peek at this, what I've got going on here, I see all of the different activities that my students have been working on. And if I want to tag an activity to a standard, I would simply do that by clicking on the activity, and I could edit it and tag it with standards. So if I want to go in and edit it, I could tag standards here. So remember, I'm doing an activity that I've already done, and I'm going to go ahead and edit that. And that allows me to go to the area where it says standards. So in this window, you're probably familiar with this window. This is a window we use a lot when we're assigning seesaws. But notice how I have that standards button there. When you go to assign it, I can choose which standard. I'm going to go my ELA here. And I want to go specific to my language standards. So I'm going to type in language. And I can go, oh, I know this one is, particular. I can go grab whatever standard it is that I want to grab. And let's say I grab it. And then when I am done here and my activity has been tagged to a standard, I'm going to save that tag. So now I see that that standard is tagged. So now when I want to look at a standards view of that dashboard, I'm going to go back to my activity details there. I see my standards view. I see my standards view. I'm going to go back to my window there. Where to go? Remember, I'm looking at my progress tab and I see my standards view. Remember, activities view versus standards view. What will happen is anything that's been tagged to a standard, hey, look, these have now been tagged to a standard, and it starts to show me my students' success or maybe lack thereof on a particular activity. So that's just kind of like what it looks like in a class that actually has data, is that you tag it to standards. Give you about 2 more minutes. Hopefully you're exploring data. I have people sharing in the chat. We haven't started using this yet, but soon. Thank you for sharing that. Forward thinking, right? Maybe we're not using it yet, but we can start doing that soon. But remember, the best place to really do that is when you are assigning it. You have an activity, you can go in and right before you hit assign, make sure that you've selected the appropriate standards to tag there. As you're looking at the different filters, you can go through and see if students have started something, if they're working on it, if you need to approve it yet, right? And you can see their score. And then you can also see if they've gotten a standard score. About 1 more minute. And if you have questions, oh, Natalie shares, looking forward to editing and tagging the standards to past assignments. Yes, right? If you haven't done this yet, you can retroactively go do that. You can do an entire assignment, or you can just do individual student activities. Personally, I would go into my assignments and back tag that way. But just know that the best way to go about doing that is to tag the standard when you assign it. That way you're not having to hunt through things later. All right, so here's a chat question for you. Let's come on back. If you're over there exploring, come on back. Here's a question. What is your next step? So based on what you see on the progress dashboard in the chat, would you share what is your next step based on what you see in your progress dashboard? What's the next step for you? What do you need to do next? Right? Just a thought. Before I share some ways that you can really go in with that data and support for differentiation in your classroom, right? What do you think you need to start? Maybe your first step is just tagging standards, right? Maybe tagging standards is the next step for you. We need to make sure that you're grading and marking those standards. And then also know that you can take some other steps too, and that's what we're going to talk about, is how we can use that data to differentiate. So in the chat, someone says, I'd like to start adding standards to my assignments. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Norma says, I'm going to start adding the standards. Yep, that's probably the next step for a lot of us, right? Matching standards to assignments already done, says Mrs. Mendoza. Thank you for sharing that in the chat. All right, so let's talk about it. So now you have data. We know that we can tag standards. We can view data. Nicolette says this is exciting. It really is, right? Because if you're already using Seesaw, this is just taking it to that next level, right? Many of you might be doing activities. And sometimes when I find activities in the Seesaw library, they may already have standards tagged. But it maybe I want to make sure that they're tagged to my standards, right? What's the appropriate standard set for where you are in California? You want to make sure that you are tagging with your standards. So once you have analyzed that data, right? Let's fast forward, right? So once you have that, the next step really is planning for differentiated instruction, differentiated learning based on those student needs. So luckily we have all you need in Seesaw to be responsive to your instruction and support those students, right? So my understanding now is that you do have a 4-point rubric on your standards-based report card. So 4 stars would probably be perfect, right? So you can do, you're not yet approaching, progressing, meeting the standard, or exceeding the standard. Those are your 4 points on your already existing report card. So that aligns so perfectly with the Seesaw tool. So you can choose the standard, put it on that 4-star, and when students do the activities, you can decide what that is. Is that a 4? Is it a 1? Based on whatever rubric you use, right? So how can we support differentiation? Let's go to the next step. So one of the first ways to use Seesaw to differentiate your learning is to find a lesson in the Seesaw library that supports the misconceptions or the learning that students continue, like what are they doing? Where are they getting it wrong? And how can we reteach that? So one thing I might do is use a lesson from the Seesaw library. So when I look at this particular bit of data, like here's an example of specific data, right? I identify this standard or a group of standards that your entire class needs some more targeted practice with. I see here, I see that maybe we need some additional practice here. I can see how my red group, I have this set up by groups. Are you using groups yet? I'll show you those in a few minutes. I can see my red group, I can see where they're at, and they scored low on one of my focus standards for this reading standard. So I want to find a lesson to support that standard so they can have some differentiated practice that meets their needs. So here it says, using information, it's RL 2.7, right? So how are they using that information? Well, I need an activity that supports that. So I go to Seesaw, and a lot of times we will search, like that's one thing I do. I'll search the Seesaw library, I'll search the community library, but have you ever noticed this button here that says browse by standards and curriculum? Right there, right? So you can switch up the search to make it for that particular standard. That is one way to kind of switch the way you search, is actually search by that standard. So I'm going to switch on over to that now. And notice I'm searching different here now, right? It's not my typical like library search. Now I'm searching for standards. So I'm going to go into my grade. I'm going to go ahead and choose, is this English, Spanish? What am I doing here? And I can do a search. And then that standards alignment tool will find my lessons that support the student's need on that standard. So I'll select my state, my standard set, all that, hit search. And I notice here that there are 11 correlations, and this is just in the Seesaw library. These are 11 activities that support this standard, use information gained from illustrations and words in print to demonstrate understanding the character, setting, or plot. So how do we use pictures to support comprehension, RL 2.7, and when I click on that, it actually loads up some ideas for me. So I see here are all of these activities that specifically support that standard. So I did my standard search. I see, oh, this Power Blocks ELA. Oh, anyone using Power Blocks? I love Power Blocks. Learning Turtle and Rainbow Bear are my favorite. If you're not checking out the Power Blocks lessons in K2 especially, and then also for our 3rd and 4th grade teachers, Power Blocks are great for our students who are missing some of their foundational skills, right? So again, I went to the standard search. I put in my standard. I searched for correlations. It's listing for me here a number of activities I could do. So let's take a peek at one. I'm going to tap on this one here. How do characters respond to challenges in a text? right? And here we go. I see this great little lesson from Seesaw that does that very standard. I can see it's standard there. I can see that there's some different pieces. I go in, I see there's a video, and then there's some follow-up activities. This is perfect. I can assign this to just the students that need it. Remember, I got this data based on one of my groups, and I noticed that my one particular group had a need for this standard. So by using the standard search, I found this activity that follows up and reteaches some of that content. So from there, oftentimes when you assign things in Seesaw, like our default is to just push it out to everyone. But you can easily differentiate at this point by assigning that activity to just the group of students who need to focus on that skill. So in my case, I had that red group, and I've already set up my groups, but I can go in and I can choose. When I choose edit students and groups, I can decide which group I want to assign this activity to. Remember, noticed a deficit or a need, found the activity. I don't want to give this to everyone, but I do want to give it to that small group based on the standards data I collected. So now I'm going to edit my student groups. I can see the standards are there, right? I can organize so I can make sure that the tag standards are there. Cool. And then from there, I make sure that it is just the standards. Maybe I really just want to focus on that RL 2.7, so I might get rid of some of the other standards that are tagged, right? I really want to focus on that one. And then once I save it, I can assign it to just those students. Remember, I chose just my red group. I know some of you are like, how do I make groups? Is anyone thinking that right now? I'll show you in just a minute, but I can make it to just those 4 students in that group, right? It'll save us some time. I know sometimes I don't assign everything to everyone because I really just want to make sure that I'm, differentiated as needed. So once I hit assign, right, it goes out to my students, all right? Using groups in Seesaw is that second way we can be responsive. So we know one way to be responsive is to give them differentiated instruction, but the second way to be responsive is to use groups. How you create student groups in Seesaw, you make it much easier on yourself to quickly assign some activities to just certain students. So it'll also be easier when you're looking at that progress dashboard, the one with all the standards. It'll be easier to view that data when you're looking just at those student groups as well. So it's to start using groups. You ready for this one? I'll go slow because I know this is a really popular one with teachers. You start, of course, with clicking on your wrench. If you have the new layout, I'm curious if someone could let me know. Do you have old layout in your domain yet, or do you have new layout? This is the new layout. Some of you might have a screen that looks like this, and some of your screens might look like what we've always seen in Seesaw. Old layout, okay, yeah. It changes like any time in technology, like they move the buttons. Why'd they move the buttons? Usually it's for a purpose, but so what you'll do in your layout, you'll come up to that top corner and you'll click on the wrench. That's where most of the settings happen in Seesaw, is up in that wrench. So I'm going to click on the wrench, and then I'm going to find this section. Look right there. It says Manage Student Groups. So I went wrench. I come to the student section, and I'm going to choose Manage Student Groups. I'm going to pause for a moment. So those of you who want to play along, I know some of you, I heard some people saying they're coming from a phone. So I know this might not be a good time to try it on your own, but I know some of you are like really excited to do this. So I'm giving you a moment. Remember, I went to my Seesaw, clicked on the wrench, and then I went Manage Student Groups. Cool? Okay. Next step from there, I go through and I can name my group. So you might have math groups, you might have reading groups, you might have like all except. Sometimes you might have a group that is like for most of your kiddos, but in my own classroom right now, I have 2 inclusion students who are only with us for about an hour a day. So I'm probably going to have mostly a group that has everyone but them. That way, when I go ahead and assign something, I don't have to go and uncheck them each time, right? I can just push out to everyone except those 2. And then that way, when I do want to include them on a Seesaw activity, I can just add them there. So you want to go ahead and name your group. Name it something that makes sense to you, right? You're going to hit add the student group, and you then will go through and it'll give you an opportunity to change your students. Know that anytime you need to add or edit groups, you go back to the same thing, and you can have up to 100 different groups. That's a lot of room for differentiation. probably don't need 100 different groups, but no, you can have that many. So I named my groups. And then from there, now on the right-hand side, notice that I do have the ability to click on just those students, right? So that's one way to create those groups. So here we go. The third way, the third opportunity to be responsive to your students' needs is to give some actionable feedback in Seesaw. So I know I've given some instruction, provided some activities, measured how they did based on the standards, but now it's time to give some feedback to my students. When I provide actionable feedback, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit review. A lot of that happens when I'm reviewing student work. From there, I can comment on a student's post. We're probably already using that. Notice right here, just so you can see this particular activity, I just want to give you a little preview. See there where it says MP4 model with mathematics? This wasn't a content standard. This is actually one of the math practices that was tagged. And so when you're setting yourself up, know that you don't have to do every activity and every standard. A good place to start would be just pick one area. So this particular teacher you see was tagging math practices, not all of the math standards, but just math practices. Picking a small area to tag standards might be a good starting place. So I see here, here's an activity. I see the tag standard there. I haven't graded based on standard yet, but I can leave a comment. So I'll comment onto that student's post. Of course, there I can do two things. I can either leave a typed comment or an audio comment for the student. And so I want to make sure it's actionable based on the standards so they know what to do next so they can work towards mastery, right? So I said, hey, you created 3 packs of cards with the blue circles. Now I'd like you to reread the question and see how many cards should be in each pack. So the teacher noticed that this kiddo here did 3 packs with 3, but when you reread the story, it's supposed to be 3 packs of 8. Right? So I'm asking the student, I'm giving them some feedback here. Hey, why don't you reread and see how many cards were supposed to be in each of those packs? So now I've gone ahead there, added some feedback, and that helps them move towards that. And then of course I can send it back to the student. That send back button is a great way to have them try again. And that's a thing in my grade 1 class. I send things back sometimes. And if I don't leave feedback, sometimes they're like, Miss Stewart, I already did this one. Why did you give it back to me again? So using either typed feedback or with my grade 1 students, oftentimes I just leave a little voice comment and said, hey, read it again. Or sometimes I'll say something like that that's like, specifically like, oh, I noticed that the instructions said for you to use tally marks and you use numbers. Can you change your graph so that it's a tally chart instead of a number chart? Leaving that tiny little bit of feedback when I send it back, now they have action they can take versus just like, hey, why'd you send this back to me? I've given them a reason. So that's another way to differentiate there and also to support them towards mastery is by giving those specific little bits of actionable insights so they can be successful, right? Students do get a notification when you send something back to them. They get a little notification here that shows, hey, you got some feedback, right? And a pro tip, just so you know, make sure that you do grade the standard you tag to the activity when you're approving it. This is a great time to come in. See right here, I can decide what was the level of success so far. And maybe the student was correct in how they answered the question in the multiple choice, but their model just isn't quite there. So I can go ahead and say, oh, well, they're at about 2. Remember, connected family members do not see these grades. So if you're here and you've tagged a standard, the family members don't see those marks. So that's just an important thing to know is that the family members don't see that. All righty. I'm going to give you a little bit more explore time. And I'm going to have you go to that library button, right? You're either going to find lessons in the Seesaw library you can use to do some differentiation, or if you want to go set up your groups, maybe now's a good time to do that. Find a student post, maybe practice leaving a comment, right? Go ahead and just go push some buttons for a few minutes. I do want to point out one thing in the library though, because this is really like my favorite thing ever. I'm going to go ahead and here I am like Seriously, not finding, there we go. I'm in my libraries. They moved that library button. Oop, I got someone coming. So here we go, and I'm going to go in, and I see a question in the chat. I'll get you right in a second, Nicolette. When I'm doing my, my exploration time, go into this ELA button. So remember, I went Seesaw Library, and I went to the ELA selection. Some of my favorite resources are right here. Grammar Detectives for 345, amazing, as well as the hope it's in third grade, so I don't see it yet. I need to change down. I love that I can switch. In the second grade, you'll see Power Blocks. Oh, these are great lessons you can assign to students to reteach some of those basics they might need to know. So right now, here's your challenge, and I'm going to give you some time, and I'll come answer your question, Nicolette. Go to the library, navigate to that Seesaw library there. Make sure you use the wrench to create some student groups. And then also maybe go practice giving actionable feedback. Think about that when you give feedback. More than just good job, but something that helps guide them in the right direction. And send it back, right? Take a couple minutes and do that. This is your Explore time. We're probably going to go for about 10 minutes with the Explore time. But what I want to do is answer the question Nicolette just gave in the chat. It says, when searched by standard, how is it determined that an activity supports the standard? That is an excellent question. So I will address that. What you're saying is that here I am in a lesson, and I'm going to grab this here. And how is it determined? In the Seesaw standards, right? Our Seesaw like teachers are going in and tagging them. Now, in the community library, when you get something from the community library, you're going to want to be a critical consumer, right? And you're going to go in and make sure that what you think is that standard is the same. And you have the power, Nicolette, to take it to the standard you think. So sometimes when it comes to rigor, or sometimes when it comes to, what that standard actually looks like, maybe in second grade, gosh, I'll use the example of the strength of meaning, right? So in first grade, we teach synonyms, and that's words that mean the same thing. But we really know that in second grade, it takes it to another level. We're not just matching words that mean the same thing, but we are talking about weak words and strong words, right? Strength of meaning. So when I look at activity on strength of meaning, and I want to make sure it reaches the fullest level of that rigor, right? I don't want to tag that standard in it unless it's actually measuring strength of meaning. So if I find an activity, I'm like, this is cool, but this actually isn't that, I can change that. So even if you find an activity, if you want to modify the standard because you don't agree with the standard that's been tagged, remember, you can go through and edit the standards. Anything you find in the Seesaw library has been, it's been vetted by Seesaw educators. So how does that know that in Iowa, this is RL 1.7, and in California, it is, RI 2.4? Seesaw educators have tagged it. However, if you're in the community library, community library is amazing, but these are created by people everywhere and anywhere. So Nicolette, I would say in order for you to tag standards there, really just be a critical consumer, take a look at it and say, do I agree with this standards tag? And you can just make a copy and tag it with whatever standards you feel are appropriate. Thank you, Nicolette. I'm glad that answered your question. Remember, we're going to go probably about, I'd say 7 more minutes, about 7 more minutes, and you're going to go into that library. Try to use that standards alignment tool. If you didn't see it there, I'm going to go into the Seesaw library, and I see browse by standards and curriculum. Browse by standards and curriculum, and go through and see if you can use the curriculum alignment tool to try some things out. Maybe you want to choose your California standards, and we're going to go to maybe ELA, your grade, and I'm going to do activities only in English for now. Do a quick search. And what it does is it brings up everything that correlates to my standards. So let's come on back. As you're starting to bring yourself on back, did anyone find anything amazing to share? Like, did you find something like, oh, I didn't know these were here? If you found a great lesson, like I'm going to come over here to this grammar detectives lesson. I love grammar detectives for the older years just because it takes something boring like grammar and just makes it a little bit more, engaging. So the Grammar Detectives collection is fun because It starts with an introduction video, and then there's a series of activities, including a quick check. There's a practice activity, and there's a quick check that I can assign to students. So let's say I found this and I love it, and I want to share it with other teachers. I can ... and I can share. So if you found something you really like, or something that's tagged with standards or measures your standards well, will you share it in the chat? So as you were exploring, if you found something cool, remember, find the ... and hit share lesson, ... share, ... share. Choose the one that says copy teacher activity. So ... share and copy the link. And then over in the chat, like if you wanted to see this lesson, I'll just put that over in the chat. So if you found a really cool lesson and you want to share out what you found, go ahead and drop it in there. So let's say, oops, I'm going to put this to everyone. I'm going to drop this into the chat. This is for everyone. If you found a cool lesson and you want me to show it on the screen, or you found a cool activity that measured your standards, remember, go to the activity, find the ... choose share. And the best one to grab is going to be the one that says copy teacher activity link. So you copy that link and drop it over in the chat. So if you found a great activity that measures standards, drop it in the chat. Anyone find anything cool? And then here's a discussion question after that. Let's say, how will you start using Seesaw to support some differentiated instruction in your classroom? This is your kind of wrap-up discussion. If you would, in the chat. Let's see. Natalie says, something I learned is that you can edit Seesaw library activities and modify them to meet your students' needs. And you can also add pages to it accordingly. Yes, thank you for sharing that, Natalie. Natalie learned that you can edit Seesaw activities and modify them to meet your students' needs. That is a great thing to know, that when you find one, if it's in the Seesaw library, you hit the edit button. And if it's in the community library, let's say you find a great activity in the community library and you want to use it. Oh, this is a great one, I like it, but it's not exactly right for my students. Like sometimes you find stuff and it's cool, but not perfect. So you can, when you save it, you have the option to, let me show you, ... copy and edit. So if you find something great, but it's not perfect and you want to adapt it to meet your students' needs, like Natalie shared, you can copy and edit that activity to customize it for your students. Cool. What else here? Norma says, I like how easily I could find lessons for differentiation, whether lower or higher level students. Yep. So if you're a grade 4 teacher and you know that students need some foundations from before, you can just go over to the other grades and find some previous stuff there and assign it. Or if you have students that need to be challenged, right? They need a little bit of something extra, you could do that too. Thank you for sharing that. Let's see, someone says, I'm looking at the lessons. I'm planning on using this to support small groups. I didn't know you could create your own small groups. Yep, absolutely. You can create small groups. Cool, great learning. Mrs. Mendoza says, I would use it for differentiating homework. Yep, that is a great use. Kathy shares, I can add a group and differentiate assignments for some of my students who are struggling with grade level concepts. Yep, you absolutely can do that. Cool. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Any other ideas? How will you use Seesaw to differentiate? If anyone wants to unmute and chat, we can do that as well. But if you would, in the chat, how will you use Seesaw to differentiate learning? How will you use Seesaw to differentiate learning? We want to be responsive to our students' needs. Small groups, yeah, that is, someone says, I love the small groups feature. Nice. Differentiating homework, yes, absolutely. Sometimes when it comes to homework, like I really love giving students opportunities to practice, but sometimes it's just like the number of copies, right? When we share it in Seesaw, absolutely. Susanna says groups, yes, with an exclamation point for sure. Differentiate assignments with each group. Give students just what they need, right? That is absolutely being responsive. I've identified a need using the progress dashboard, or sometimes we just identify needs because we're teachers and we know what they need, right? So we can make data-based instructions, or just, I can tell the student's really struggling on multiplication because they're still working on this repeated addition component of it. So I want to go back a little bit and give them some opportunities to practice repeated addition that will help build that foundational, right, that understanding so they can have the concrete practice of repeated addition before we have them go to that kind of abstract multiplication fact thing. Cool, cool, cool. Love it. Thank you for sharing out. All right, my friends. Well, we're going to start wrapping up in the next couple of minutes, but one thing need to know is that we did it, right? Our two goals. We're going to talk about using the progress dashboard. The progress dashboard is a place that we can monitor and track student progress against standards. So if you tag your activity with standards, you can start monitoring it, right? It doesn't automatically happen, right? We have to start making sure that when we take that step, when you go to assign it, you're tagging a standard. Hopefully when we do make assignments in Seesaw, that's for a purpose, right? Because it does align with some of our instruction and some of the goals we have, our learning intentions. So tag the standards first, and then you'll have that data after. And then just think about how you can use that data after, right, to differentiate learning in Seesaw, right? So your own goal, set a goal. How will you grade work? How will you start tracking student progress? For a lot of us, we've already decided, right? Start tagging standards. Step one, start tagging standards. That is where it will begin, is just with the part where we tag the standards. And then from there, how will you do it? Maybe some of you will start with a particular subject, right? That might be the standard for every person is just math. I'm only going to do this for math. Sometimes it's easier to just take one little chunk at a time instead of trying to conquer all of it, because that's a lot of work to, try to master everything at once. But let's just say in math, and you can keep it simple. Maybe you're just doing geometry, numbers in base 10. Maybe you're just doing those master domains in math instead of doing specific standards. Maybe we're just doing a high level standard, geometry, measurement and data, numbers and operations in base 10. Maybe you're just choosing that top level standard and instead of trying to drill down to specific ones, maybe we could just tag that high level domain of the area, and that way you can start getting data. That might be a good place to start, so you're not trying to, learn something new and have all these different standards to master. So,
Susan, one idea that I had, this is Liz, was teachers, if you look at your progress report, and I know you're going to be working on those in the next couple of weeks for second trimester, think about maybe a few of the standards in language arts and math that are a struggle to really assess and that you really want to focus on. Instead of trying to do everything, maybe choose 2 from each category and make sure you're finding activities that match that standard. I love, Nicolette, that you brought that up, that we really want to make sure it's matching the rigor of the standard, and then be really intentional in that 4-star rubric, not just they did a really great job completing this activity, but did they really show that they've mastered the standard? That would be a 3, because nobody else sees that marking. That's just for you. Then when you go to do your progress reports in June, you can look at that progress. That's why I timed this training right when I did. So those might be some things to consider in next steps.
Yeah, thank you for adding that local context, Liz. That's awesome. Very, very cool. All right. Hopefully you have some ideas there. Know that this link I'm going to put in the chat right now, but I'll also send it to Liz, who I know can make sure it gets to everyone. But over in the chat, I'm going to drop a quick link. And this is what we call our one-pager, right? It's a resource from the session. You'll find the key takeaways from our session today. All these links, all these things in the middle here are quick little short videos to show these things. So that's a great part of getting this resource, is they're just quick little 2-minute videos instead of watching a whole video. Sometimes you just need those teeny tiny nuggets of learning. So one says how to use drafts, how to use the progress tab, create and manage student groups. So if you need support with managing student groups, or you want to forward this to a friend, because oh my goodness, did you know you can make groups in Seesaw? So you can also put that there. Oops, my link. I don't think I got the whole link. Let me get it to you though. Here you go. Here's the entire link for you. There it goes. So if you want that, that will be available to you. I'll send it out to Liz in just a little bit as well. Of course, there's always lots of great resources for teachers at the Seesaw Teacher Center here, and I'll give one more link. This is where you can find teacher resources, quick start guides, short training videos, webinars, and more. And with that, I really do just want to thank you for being here. Of course, we all get better through feedback. So if you have any feedback for me, I'm going to leave this last little nugget here for you. Uh, Please, if you want to leave some feedback, that's how we get better, right? We know that feedback makes us grow. So anything you can offer would be appreciated. Brief little quick survey. Remember, my name is Susan. And questions. We're officially done. We got about 5 minutes though. So if you have like, hey Susan, can you show me how to just ask away and I will help out with that. Otherwise, thank you so much for your time today. And I hope you enjoy tracking progress against standards.